An emergency powerful strike, another major liquidation, and urgent details about Trump and Putin's conversation. We're talking about that today with Roman Svitan. Roman Radio Svitati, thank you for taking the time. We wish everyone good health. Friends, traditionally, we appeal to you. Immediately put a like, write in the comments where you are watching us from. We are watched from Nikolaev, Kherson, Italy, and many other countries. So right now, your city, your country, and your opinion on the topics we will discuss. This is important for the promotion of the video. It is especially interesting to hear your reaction to Trump's conversation with Putin. Leave your impressions and emotions under this video. Roman, let's start with the good news. The day before, the commander of the 155th Marine Brigade was eliminated at Kushna. Now we will show his picture and a picture of the deputy commander-in-chief of the Russian Navy. Let us remind you that this brigade was involved in the murders of our prisoners of war. What do you know about this character, about his liquidation, and what can you say about it?
Ну, 155-ю Владивостокскую, так называемую, бригаду морской пехоты под Угледаром утюжили, наверное, года полтора.
The 155th Vladivostok Marine Brigade was destroyed near Ugledar for about a year and a half. 2 members of this brigade were killed there. The brigade commander was there. He knows what it is like. He survived at Ugledar. It so happened that he survived. But after that, the 155th was transferred to the Kursk direction, together with the 810th Marine Brigade from Crimea and Ivanovo paratroopers. The further fate of this officer did not work out, at least in the role of the brigade commander and deputy commander. He was hit by our means of destruction. We have repeatedly emphasized the importance of the Kursk direction. The Russians are now trying to advance on the territory of the Sumy region, but they do not have full-fledged rear support. It is weak. These are Elgov, Rilsk, as well as Glushkovo and Korenevo. The headquarters of the 155th Brigade was hit in the Korenevo area. Also, Roman, another liquidation occurred. Russian war correspondents report the so-called mayor of occupied Luhansk was blown up today. According to our SBU sources, Monalis Pivalov, former head of the occupation administration, was eliminated. An interesting figure. Roman, what can you say about this? Kherson is persona non grata in Ukraine. He himself refused to leave. He was liquidated. This happened because he, being one of the leaders of the occupation administration, was involved in the killings of Ukrainian citizens and the seizure of territory by Russian troops. He was a combatant and a terrorist. All those who are now on our land as part of the Russian forces are terrorists and must be destroyed. There is no negotiation with terrorists. The operation to eliminate them began back in 2014. Everyone involved in the genocide of the Ukrainian people and terrorist activities in Ukraine will be destroyed, sooner or later. Our special services, in this case the Security Service of Ukraine, are involved in this work. We have the main Directorate of Intelligence, the Foreign Intelligence Service, the Counterintelligence of the Security Service, the Counterintelligence of the Border Guard Service, and at least 3 or 4 closed departmental intelligence agencies that perform special tasks and are involved in the liquidation operation. No terrorist will escape the punishment he deserves. This is proactive work to prevent the spread of terrorism and not to fall under its attack again. The best option is to eradicate it like a cancerous tumor. This is what our special services are doing. They are working efficiently and professionally. Roman, let's move on to other news. The day before, Russia was reminded of the fire at the Tambov gunpowder factory, which occurred on July 3rd. This enterprise had previously been repeatedly hit by Ukrainian drones. This was reported by Astra. Also, the governor of the Tambov region confirmed the fact of the fire. What do you know about this incident? Who could have been involved and what enemy losses can we talk about now? If not the Tambov plant, then at least those who are not indifferent are involved in destroying the Russian military industry, which is not really a defense industry, but is aimed at producing means of attack. Gunpowder is the key component that the Russians use to create ammunition, missiles, and other weapons. They buy some of the gunpowder and some of it they produce themselves, including at the Tambov plant, which is an old gunpowder production facility. We have repeatedly tried to strike it, but it is a military facility. Drones cannot completely stop its work or destroy it. At most, they can disrupt certain technological processes, for example those related to power supply, but this is not critical, as the enterprise is quickly restored. Plants of this type must be taken out of service either by ballistic missiles or cruise missiles with warheads of at least half a ton, preferably tandem, or through the actions of confidence from within. Since there is no evidence of drones getting there, there was most likely an attempt to blow it up from the inside. It could have been carried out by our confidants, the security services, or the local resistance, what I call those who are not indifferent. There are more and more such people who are not indifferent on the territory of the Russian Federation, and they are actively helping. First of all, they act for their own sake, damaging the Russian military machine and economy in order to accelerate the disintegration of Russia. Indirectly, they are also helping us, because the destruction of any military facility brings our victory closer. Friends, share your thoughts and impressions in the comments. It's very important. Support Roman Svitan's analysis with a like to help it reach more people, including in occupied Russian territory. Roman, here's good news. A powerful strike hit an ammunition depot in occupied Khartsyzk, Donetsk region. We have eyewitness video. Watch it and let's start the discussion. Roman, what was the BK in occupied Khartsyzk exploding in the video? What do you know about it, and who might be behind it? My native Khartsyzk is not far from my home. I am from Mikhail, and Khartsyzk is quite close. At one time, it helped me to get back on my feet. There is a good swimming pool there, where I treated my back after leaving the army. I know this city well. I know it inside and out. There are a lot of industrial enterprises there. The Russians mainly use the Khartsyzk pipe plant as part of their military infrastructure. It is involved as a warehouse, used for the preparation of certain types of weapons, repair of equipment, storage and transshipment. The plant has convenient access roads, which makes it a logistically favorable facility. Near Khartsyzk, many former mining and metallurgical enterprises are now mostly inactive. Some have been repurposed, including as warehouses. One warehouse identified by the Security Service of Ukraine stored missiles for multiple rocket launchers and anti-aircraft systems. After discovery, a combat mission was launched using long-range strikes, mainly drones operated by special services. Despite strong enemy air defenses, the mission succeeded. This is part of a larger operation, including strikes on Crimea. The main Directorate of Intelligence, the Security Service of Ukraine, the Ukrainian Navy, and the Ukrainian Defense Forces have been actively practicing the air defense system in Crimea in recent weeks. This has led to the Russians being forced to increase the density of air defense on the peninsula at the expense of weakening other parts of the front line, including Donbass. They had to transfer some of their air defense systems to Crimea, thus weakening other areas. Ukrainian security services immediately took advantage of this, accomplishing the combat task and destroying the missiles. This is unequivocally good news for Ukraine. There is official confirmation from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine about a successful strike on the Energia enterprise in the temporarily occupied territory of Luhansk region. There is a video from the scene of the incident. Let's watch it now. This enterprise produces power supplies for universal planning and correction modules. Roman, explain in simple words what this facility is why it is important to the Russians and the occupiers, and what losses they suffered as a result of this strike. The battery factory, which supplies batteries for various types of military equipment, has been struck several times before, but critical damage to its key production mechanisms has never before been achieved. This time the operation was successfully realized. Competently planned and prepared penetration through the enemy's air defense system allowed attack drones to fulfill the combat mission. The plant has been shut down. It is not yet known for how long and with what losses, but at the moment the technological cycle has been completely interrupted, and Russian consumers have been left without the bulk of their batteries. Roman, let's move on to another topic. On the eve, Russian dictator Putin said that there was to be a phone conversation with US President Donald Trump. What are your assumptions about the content of this conversation? What could Putin and Trump talk about? Share your analysis of what this could mean for Ukraine in simple words. There is nothing good about the contact between these two clowns. I use that word deliberately because their behavior is outright clowning. Putin was likely thanking Trump for fulfilling his part of the bargain, stopping aid to Ukraine. In response, Putin didn't help Iran, didn't intervene, didn't cover for it, even though he had the opportunity to do so. At the very least, he could have provided a nuclear umbrella to protect Iran's nuclear facilities. Perhaps that is what the Iranians expected, but it did not do so, effectively opening Iranian airspace for strikes on nuclear infrastructure. The Iranians realized this and perceived it as a betrayal. The Muslim world has clearly assessed the situation, and Putin has yet to be held accountable for that. He kept his end of the bargain. He did not intervene, effectively handing Iran to Iran, and demanded that Trump do the same for Ukraine. Trump, like a pragmatic businessman, made a deal and honored it. As a result, military aid to Ukraine has been stopped. And it's not just aid that Trump is referring to. He has not provided Ukraine with any military support at all. Even the aid that was approved by the US Congress last year has been suspended. He stepped in to provide aid. The bulk of that aid is missiles to surface-to-air missile systems. That is air defense, our protective umbrella. Putin thanked Trump for removing that umbrella. Just as Putin did not reveal the umbrella over Iran, so Trump removed it over Ukraine. Russian long-range weapon strikes are expected soon. A combined attack using drones and missiles may be repeated. Preparations for this are already underway. Trump's act was a reason for gratitude on Putin's part, and perhaps the next deal is the exchange of Ukraine for Palestine. In fact, they are trying to give part of Ukraine to Putin. It is already noticeable. The Ukrainians will not allow this to happen. At the same time, Putin is not interfering with the takeover of Palestine and Israel's actions. Roman, I would like to talk about air defense in the context of the recent news about a possible critical shortage of air defense missiles in Ukraine. How do you assess the state of our air defense system now? What are the ways to solve this problem? Are there any possibilities to obtain missiles from European countries or through third countries? Are there any known cases of successful solutions to such a situation? And finally, your forecasts regarding the nearest shelling. What could be their architecture and how do you see it? There is nowhere to get missiles for Patriot systems and F-16 fighters except from the United States. There are certain stocks, but they are limited and may be exhausted, depending on the intensity of Russian shelling. There are inviolable reserves, but without new purchases, including through third countries, mainly European, it is impossible to replenish the stock of these systems. This applies to Patriot, F-16 and NASAMS, for which the American AIM-120 missile is used. The same goes for the Stinger complexes and other systems. Even HIMARS without GMLRS missiles turn into useless mock-ups. US supplies have been crucial for Ukraine. However, there is a risk that they will be cut off because Trump has made a deal with Russia, effectively trading Ukraine for Iran, and appears intent on honoring it. This is something we should have been prepared for. Now new ties are being forged, mostly with European countries, and some positions are being replaced. Great Britain, for example, has transferred missiles to the Raven complexes, 350 units. These are British-made Astra missiles, analogous to the American AIM-9, but without the need to coordinate with the United States. This substitution mechanism helps to offset the shortfall. As the AIM-9 is replaced by the Astra, so other items should find an alternative in European arsenals. These are our ballistics, which will be aimed at Moscow in the event of any invasion of our territory, even a single aircraft or drone. Such a regime should be the only possible one. Therefore, the first priority for the authorities is to ensure the production of a sufficient number of ballistic missiles capable of reaching Moscow. Now we vitally need missiles with a range of 500 kilometers, such as the Grom. All resources should be directed precisely to the development of ballistics, putting aside secondary areas. It is necessary to replace other positions and focus on the key task of protecting our skies. While the best defense remains an effective surface-to-air missile system, especially to cover our troops, having our own ballistics creates strategic deterrence. Without missiles to Patriot systems, we will be in a vulnerable position, especially if we cannot mirror the Kremlin. This is a key principle. It is possible to defend against Russian air targets, including drones and cruise missiles, even with massive attacks, 500 to 1,500 units, if the air defense system is intelligently rebuilt. What is needed now is to create a dense frontal line of air defense. The real front to be covered is from the border with Belarus to Odessa, about 2,000 kilometers. For example, Raven complexes, some of which have already been transferred by Great Britain, will be suitable for this purpose. If we place one complex for every 10 kilometers, we will need about 200 such installations. These vehicles are lightweight, cheap, and can be assembled from available components. We have discussed this many times before. The R-73 missile is a Soviet design with a thermal homing head, similar to the ASRAAM or AIM-9. It is more than 40 years old, cheap and massively available. There are thousands of such missiles around the world, and you can buy tens of thousands. It can be mounted on any chassis. An example is the Magura boat, on which GSD specialists installed the R-73 and used it near Crimea, shooting down a helicopter. The same can be done with an ordinary truck. The missile weighs about 100 kilograms, and there is no obstacle to putting 2, 3, or 4 missiles with a simple guidance system on one vehicle. This creates a mobile fire team capable of engaging targets at all altitudes with a range of more than 10 kilometers. This missile is capable of engaging targets at all altitudes. The R-73 is an air-to-air missile designed for fighters, but it can be adapted for ground use. The British have already implemented a similar solution with the ASRAAM missile, which is also a fighter missile. It was mounted on a chassis, creating the Raven mobile air defense system. This system has already destroyed hundreds of Russian drones, missiles, and other weapons. This approach needs to be scaled up to create a frontal air defense system and cover the entire stretch of about 2,000 kilometers, from Odessa along the coast, across the Marsh contact line, and up to the border with Belarus. All this should be transferred to the Corps. Each Corps needs its own air defense brigade to cover its entire area and provide echelon defense up to 50 kilometers deep. using mobile anti-aircraft groups. All mobile firing units and weapons, including machine guns, should also be sent, useless in peacetime, but vital in combat. Fighters and light attack aircraft may become active, including modified aeropracticas with machine guns. However, they should not operate alongside mobile air defense teams to avoid coordination issues and risks.
Я думаю, надеюсь, по крайней мере, легкомоторки появятся штурмовики или наши аэропракты с пулеметами, которые будут выполнять боевую задачу, но их нельзя вместе смешивать вместе с мобильными группами.
We need to densify the frontal air defense system with low-cost air defense systems such as Raven, including variants with our own production. We have several thousand mobile teams that need to be deployed along the entire front line and given control of fighter drones. This will ensure that no airplane-type aircraft, no aerodynamic targets will be penetrated. As for ballistic threats, strategic deterrence is the only effective response. Ballistics can only be stopped by an asymmetric strike aimed at the Kremlin. Roman, it is quite fair to predict that more and more drones and missiles, including ballistic missiles, should be flying over Russia's temporarily occupied territory. Friends, share in the comments what you think about this, where exactly it should fly. Write your emotions and thoughts. It is also interesting to read your reaction to a possible conversation between Trump and Putin. Roman, back to the topic of air defense. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said that if the US fails in its support for Ukraine, Europe should do everything it can to make up for those losses. Ursula von der Leyen also noted that the EU has financial resources to help Ukraine. How realistically will our European partners be able to support us in case of a complete withdrawal of US funding, and how effective can this assistance be? Europe is not far behind the United States in terms of economic development. In a certain period, it was even ahead of the rest of the world, including America. It is only in recent decades that the US has pulled ahead, mainly due to specific economic mechanisms. In general, Europe is comparable to the United States in terms of potential. Therefore, if the issue of financial support comes up, Europe is capable of solving it, especially given the support of the G7 countries. In addition, there are other European resources. If the G7 supports and there are financial instruments, the only thing left is to find equipment, ammunition, and fulfill the tasks. Sometimes rotational solutions are possible. For example, if there is a shortage of PAC-3 missiles at the position with the Patriot system, it is possible to transfer the system to the Europeans and in return receive SMT systems from them and continue working with them. Such mechanisms are quite realistic, especially if the United States replenishes the missing missiles to the Europeans. Denmark, Belgium, and the Netherlands can help. They have their own stocks, and this is a good initiative. In addition, it is possible to jointly produce some systems that are already in use, for example, the same NASAMS. The Nordic countries are capable of supporting us both financially and technically. In the strategic perspective, we should consider reducing our dependence on the US. This does not mean a complete rejection, but if, for example, there will be no GMLRS missiles for HIMARS, there will be no point in using them. The same goes for F-16s. Without enough missiles, they become of little use. In this case, it is worth considering alternatives, for example, replacing F-16s with Swedish Gripen, if it is possible to agree on the necessary volume of deliveries. In principle, we can trade in about 100 modern airplanes to replace the F-16. We are talking about countries that have Gripen, Mirage, Rafale, or Eurofighter. This is quite possible. It is crucial for us to understand what is happening in the United States. The Americans are fulfilling their part of the bargain with Putin, effectively trading not only Ukraine for Iran or Palestine, but also the European Union for influence in the Middle East. This is no longer just a Ukrainian problem. The issue of moving away from American dominance in the security sphere must be resolved in Europe as well, and such processes have already begun. Europe is becoming aware of the need for an independent defense policy. The way out from under American influence will be long, but the main thing is to start it. There is already an understanding, because Trump's behavior towards Ukraine shows how he will act with any European country and with the European Union as a whole, including NATO.
Американского сапога в этом смысле, но он длительный по времени. Ну, главное, чтобы его запустить, главное, чтобы было понимание. Понимание уже точно есть, потому что как Трамп ведет себя с Украиной, по большому счету, также поведет себя с любой европейской страной и вообще с Евросоюзом в целом. Ну, как страной, как союзом натовским.
Roman, in conclusion, I would like to return to the strategic aspect of this war. The Western press is increasingly reporting that Putin is allegedly planning to sit out Trump's term, accumulate weapons, stabilize the economy, and continue a large-scale war. You and I regularly discuss various scenarios that appear in the information field, but I would like to hear your assessment from a purely military and economic point of view. How realistic is it that Putin will be able to implement such a strategy, given Russia's resources, human, technical, and economic?
Ця стратегія, на вашу думку, бо про ресурси росіян людські, в техніці, в авіації ми теж говоримо постійно. Тут ваше бачення таких матеріалів, наскільки вони дійсно можуть відповідати тому, що є на полі бою, та наскільки Путін дійсно може хотіти спробувати таку стратегію.
Putin has already outlasted Trump in terms of theory. He will rule until 2030. While Trump's term is limited to 2028. In other words, Putin is already winning in terms of time, unless something unexpected happens, such as a sudden death or an internal coup. Otherwise, he retains power longer. There will be no confrontation between Trump and Putin for a number of reasons. One is that Trump has effectively abandoned his support for the European Union, turning his attention to the Middle East. There was some hope for him earlier, especially at the beginning of his first term, when his team included such figures as Bolton and Pompeo, politicians with a pro-European and anti-Russian stance. With such a team, one would expect a tougher line toward the Kremlin. The entourage makes the king. If Trump's team was focused on the European Union and countering Russia, it would be working in that direction. Right now, however, Trump's team is focused on the Middle East. Witak and others in the Israel lobby are setting the agenda, and Trump has turned his full attention to that region. He is not going back to the European vector. Moreover, he is addressing Middle East issues through deals with Putin. Putin, in turn, benefits from trading European interests for influence in the Middle East. There will be no turning back. Therefore, it should be clearly understood that there will be no confrontation between Trump and Putin. This means that we should not count on Trump to help not only Ukraine, but also Europe as a whole. The sooner European politicians realize this, the better. While the Ukrainian army is holding back Russian forces in battle, Europe has time to repurpose and abandon its dependence on US weapon systems. Europe has both economic and technical resources. All that remains is to form a geopolitical expediency. Now is precisely the moment when it should manifest itself. If Europe completely switches gears, it will be in time. Ukraine will have to wage war with Russia for another 3 or 4 years, during which time the Russian army will be gradually depleted. During this time, Europe must completely rebuild its security system and get out from under its dependence on American involvement. France set an example in its time. Charles de Gaulle looked ahead half a century and realized what Europe's dependence on the United States could lead to. The French have completely shut down arms production within the country. They have everything from submarines to nuclear weapons and their means of delivery. France has everything that a state concerned about its own security needs. This is what Europe should become. independent of American means of defeat, and there is a real opportunity for this within the next 3 or 4 years, while Ukraine is holding back the Russian army. During this time, Europe can completely rebuild itself. Beyond that, let Trump mind his own business. America is a distant country on the other side of the globe, across the Atlantic Ocean.
Что такое Америка? Ну, от нас это такая сильно далекая страна, в конце концов, на противоположном части земного шара, то есть прикрытая от нас Атлантическим океаном.
Roman, thank you for the conversation, for your analysis and clear position. Roman Svitan, flight instructor, colonel in the reserve of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, traditionally answered key questions. Vladyslav Solovyov was with you. Friends, right now, please like this video to support Roman Svitan's analysis. Write in the comments what you think about the topics we discussed. It is important because thanks to your activity, this video will be seen by more people. What do you think about a possible conversation between Trump and Putin? Share your thoughts on the explosions we analyzed and the elimination series. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We'll see you on the air on 24.